How close are the Texans to a doomsday coaching scenario? Ben Johnson was one of their candidates. He's no longer going to be someone that is being considered for a head coach. He's staying with the Lions. We opened our show today talking about Sean Payton, and kind of seems like perhaps Sean Payton is no longer as realistic as we thought maybe it was. DeMeco Ryans, he's the guy that is still going to interview with the Texans on Friday, but let's say he chooses to stay in San Francisco or he goes somewhere else. Out of the list of candidates, how close are the Texans to a potential doomsday scenario?
Oh, with the candidates that are still out there and the candidates that still exist on the list, a doomsday scenario to me doesn't exist. I mean, think about what a doomsday scenario is. A doomsday scenario is they randomly pivot to somebody that they haven't interviewed at the end of the process, or they pivot to somebody who's not worthy of the head coach title. Like, that's a doomsday scenario. Like, okay, yeah, if you take off Ben Johnson, he's out. Sean Payton, DeMeco Ryans, Shane Steichen, they still have some valid candidates on that list. Are they as exciting as Ben Johnson or Shane Steichen or Sean Payton or DeMeco Ryans? No, they're not as exciting. It's not a doomsday scenario.
Is Thomas Brown a doomsday scenario?
That's part of doomsday.
What about Ejiro Evero, the Broncos DC?
Ejiro Evero had a defense that if they could just score any points in Denver, they'd have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, not to say that he's not qualified, but I think a big part of what the Texans are trying to do this offseason is rejuvenate this fan base and get people bought back into the Houston Texans. Look, you could hire an unattractive name, and the guy could end up being the best coach out of any of these guys. I could end up having more success than Sean Payton, for all we know. We have no idea how it's going to work out. But
look at Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a way it happens. There's absolutely a way that it happens. But just in terms of that, there's more of an element with that with the Texans than any other team with an opening right now. It's just trying to get people bought back in. And I think the Texans would view some of these candidates, even the ones that they've interviewed, as pretty close to doomsday, because I don't think they really want some of the dudes that they've talked to.
I mean, there's a difference, though, you'd agree with, between doomsday and lacking excitement, or lacking the excitement of some of the top candidates.
Sure. Look, if you want to be super anal about the, I don't mean to call you that. I hope that didn't come off as me being mean. But if you want to be super direct with the definition of doomsday, then yeah, Josh McCown, boom, doomsday.
Doomsday.
Like that's awful. You call Lovie Smith and say, "Oh, we made a mistake. We want you back." Boom, doomsday.
Jim Caldwell would be a doomsday scenario.
Okay.
You haven't even talked to Jim Caldwell right now.
Yeah, I was wondering who else would be doomsday.
Like
Okay.
Leslie Frazier would be a doomsday scenario. You can't get excited about Leslie Frazier. I don't care if he is the defensive coordinator for a team that's in the playoffs right now. You can't get excited for him. Like, there's doomsday scenarios that exist. Like, yeah, they end up with Jonathan Gannon. It's a bit disappointing. Probably could have had him last year. That's not as exciting as DeMeco Ryans, who has San Francisco doing what they're doing. But Jonathan Gannon's not a doomsday candidate.
So you still feel good about the direction of this coaching search?
Well, again, within the parameters of what Jake's laid out, no, I wouldn't feel good if there's no Sean Payton, there's no DeMeco Ryans, Ben Johnson's already said no, and Shane Steichen's out. At that point, there's only one guy that would really excite me that's available, and that's Mike Kafka. And that's a huge risk because he's been a coordinator for 1 year.
He retired from playing football in 2017, so you're really taking a risk with a guy that hasn't been doing it for that long.
Yeah, and look, DeMeco's got a short resume as far as the coaching goes, but he's been the coordinator in San Fran. He's coordinated 2 amazing defenses in back-to-back years. Like, that's a much more significant resume than Kafka, who, yes, he calls the plays and he's the offensive coordinator, but the top offensive mind in the building is Brian Daboll. Like, that helps a ton in that. It's like Kafka excites me, but he excites me less than a lot of these other guys.
Any defensive-minded guy that's not DeMeco, I don't want to call it doomsday because doomsday is like Lovie Smith, doomsday is like McCown as we've outlined, but like Ejiro Evero, that wouldn't really excite me if I'm a fan. It just wouldn't. Like, I'm not saying he'd be a bad head coach, but you're about to take a quarterback, so your answer is let's bring in a defensive-minded guy. When you look at the teams left in the playoffs, only one of them is a defensive-minded head coach. Like, if you can't get Ben Johnson or Sean Payton decides to go elsewhere and DeMeco says no to you, I feel like you got to just find an offensive guy you want to hire because then you got to make the priority being we're just going to figure out the best guy to help develop our QB.
Yeah, look, the number one objective for this coaching search is to find the best coach. The number one objective should not be to galvanize the fan base. The number one objective should not be to sell tickets. Like, if you hire the right coach, you're going to do that because the coach is going to win games, and that puts butts in seats and gets people bought back in. But I just, like, the Texans, I think, are on this mission this offseason, and it's why I feel good about them taking a quarterback in the draft. Like, I know there are a portion or is a portion of this fan base that doesn't want that, right? It's like, I'll wait for Caleb Williams or Drake May next year, or I'll go get Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo in free agency and just draft Will Anderson or Jalen Carter or just one of the other non-quarterbacks that are out there. But I feel good about the Texans ending up with a quarterback because they're looking for sort of that PR move, that face of the franchise that gets people excited. And I think they're looking for that in their head coach as well. I think that's why they're so in on Sean Payton and wanted to make sure that they talked to Sean Payton as early as they possibly could. I think that's why that they are reaching out to some of these names that they're reaching out to. So for them, different obviously for us, but for them, I think some of these guys that they've already talked to, some of them that they will still talk to, they would view as a swing and a miss. They would view as they didn't succeed in this coaching search as much as they wanted to. Whether that's fair or not, that's up for you to interpret, but I think there are only a few names that the Texans really want from this list of 7 or 8 guys that they're going to end up speaking with as of right now.
Johnson's out, so you're not hiring him. If Sean Payton, DeMeco Ryans, and Shane Steichen then go out, you can end up with one of those other guys, but you got to interview more people. If those guys go off the board, if Steichen and Ryans and Payton all go off the board, for a variety of reasons, Ryans takes another job or Steichen takes another job or they stick with where they are, so on and so forth. If those guys go off the board and you can't hire those guys, you got to keep interviewing people. And you might interview some more people and decide, oh, okay, well, this Jonathan Gannon fellow, maybe he is the best option. But you got to keep interviewing people. You got to go talk to Kellen Moore. You got to go talk to Dan Quinn. You got to go talk to a bunch more people. You got to keep having interviews because it can't be deciding between Jonathan Gannon and Jero Avero and Thomas Brown. That's not good enough.
Let me ask y'all this. Would you use that as an indictment against Nick Caserio if he doesn't end up with a big-name coach here? Once again, time will obviously tell if you got the hire right, regardless of how big the name is. But would that be another sort of demerit against Nick Caserio if Payton goes somewhere else, DeMeco goes somewhere else, Steichen goes somewhere else, Johnson stays home, and those are seemingly the 4 top candidates for Texans fans, and none of them end up here?
I'd be concerned because I view the Texans' job as attractive. So if you couldn't hire any of those guys for a variety of different reasons, like, is that a Cal McNair thing? Is that a Nick Caserio thing? Like, I'd just be concerned about the overall health of the organization. Like, we're supposed to be past not being able to get top-of-the-line guys. You shouldn't have to settle. You might have the second or maybe the best, depending on who you talk to, attractive opening, and you couldn't get any of these guys, so that'd be a little alarming. Now, obviously, you got to get the coaching hire right no matter who the name is. But I'd at least be alarmed if I'm a fan of the Texans, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, because if they just ended up with Gannon, then I would tell you that, okay, well, Nick Caserio had a lot more power than we believed because he ended up with the guy that he, maybe was interested in last year and then ultimately just circled back around to that guy, and it was sort of a maybe not a total Fugazi process, but a bit of a sham process. It depends. If somebody else, like if DeMeco Ryans wants to go coach the Broncos because they've got a better situation on defense and they already have a quarterback, like you can't fight that. Like he picked a better quarterback situation than what you have right now, and he picked a better defensive situation right now. But like you lose to the Panthers on a guy, it's like, okay, like in Houston we believe we have a better situation than the Panthers. How did we lose to the Panthers?
Yeah,
like Shane Steichen gets down to the Panthers and the Texans, and he picks the Panthers. It's like, well, what the hell went wrong? Like is it the organization? Is it the general manager? Is it the owner? Like what happened? Like, how do you lose to the Panthers? You lose to the Broncos because somebody wants more proven situation. You lose to the Colts because they like Chris Ballard more than they like Nick Caserio. Okay, well, Chris Ballard's got a really good resume in this league. Nick Caserio's 3 years into the job. Like, okay, like you can stomach some of those things. Like how you lose out one of these guys, I think is a big thing on how you feel about it at the end.